I stood in the driveway, gift box tucked tightly under my arm, my heart thudding with nervous excitement. Then I saw him, sitting in the passenger seat of her car, smiling like he belonged there. The man I'd silently prayed would stay in our past. My daughter beamed, oblivious, as if his presence was a gift to her too. And in that moment, the birthday I'd spent months planning turned into something else entirely. A warning. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Ellen's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the pale blue ribbon around the small velvet box. The gift had been sitting in her dresser drawer for months, tucked away like a secret she could hardly keep to herself. Today was finally the day. Megan's 18th birthday. Ellen had played the moment over and over in her mind, her daughter's face breaking into surprise, the bright laugh, maybe even a tear or two when she saw what her mother had done for her. She paced the living room, every tick of the clock stretching her nerves. The sun spilled through the curtains, warming the hardwood floors, but Ellen's chest felt tight with anticipation. She glanced again at the front window. Megan's car wasn't in the driveway yet. When the sound of the garage door finally groaned open, Ellen's heart leapt. She hurried toward the door, trying not to look too eager, though her pulse gave her away. The door swung open and Megan stepped inside, her backpack slung over one shoulder, golden hair spilling loose from a messy bun. "Hey, Mom," she said, with a smile so bright it filled the room. Ellen caught the faint scent of Megan's vanilla perfume and realized how grown-up she suddenly looked. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Ellen whispered, hugging her tightly. She wanted to hold on longer, but Megan pulled back, her eyes dancing. "Thanks, Mom. You didn't forget." "Forget?" Ellen laughed softly, though her voice betrayed her nervous excitement. "Not a chance." She hesitated, clutching the velvet box behind her back. Not yet, she thought. Not here. Instead, she tried to keep her tone casual. "I was thinking, maybe we could grab lunch together. Just the two of us." Megan's brows arched in pleasant surprise. "Yeah, that sounds nice. Where to?" "You'll see," Ellen said, forcing a playful wink even as her stomach tightened. If she could just get her daughter in the car, the moment she'd been planning for months would finally arrive. They left the house together, Ellen keeping the box tucked in her purse, her palm brushing against it like a talisman. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the faint smoke of someone's chimney down the block. Ellen pulled her coat tighter, feeling oddly exposed despite the ordinary neighborhood calm. Megan chattered beside her about school, friends, and a weekend concert she wanted to see. Ellen half listened, more focused on the words she would soon have to say, the secret she was about to unfold. Every step toward the car felt like a countdown. But as they reached the driveway, Ellen froze. Through the windshield, she spotted a figure sitting in the passenger seat of Megan's car. A silhouette she hadn't expected. The person shifted slightly, their outlines sharp against the afternoon light. Ellen's throat constricted. Megan, oblivious, dug in her bag for her keys. "Oh, I didn't tell you," she said lightly, glancing toward the car. "She's coming with us." Ellen's pulse thundered in her ears. "She?" Her fingers clenched the strap of her purse, knuckles whitening as she stared at the figure inside. The birthday surprise, the moment she had built so carefully, suddenly felt fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter it all. And as Megan opened the driver's door, the mystery passenger finally lifted her face into the light. Ellen's breath caught as the passenger door creaked open. A young man unfolded himself from the seat, tall and confident, his dark hair falling just above sharp brown eyes. He smiled as if he had every right to be standing there. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," he said smoothly. "Good to see you." Ryan. The name snapped through Ellen's mind like a whip. She hadn't expected him. Not today, not here, not sitting beside her daughter on this carefully planned afternoon. Megan's grin widened, oblivious to the sudden tension that knotted in her mother's chest. Mom, you remember Ryan, right? He offered to tag along, maybe even drive us. Isn't that sweet? Sweet. Ellen felt her stomach twist at the word. Ryan leaned one arm casually on the roof of the car, his posture relaxed, but his gaze lingered on her just a second too long. She forced her lips into what she hoped resembled a smile. Yes, I remember. Her voice was thinner than she liked, and she quickly busied herself with adjusting her purse strap so Megan wouldn't notice. For a moment, she couldn't make her feet move. Getting into that car suddenly felt like stepping into the wrong story, one where her carefully rehearsed surprise had slipped out of her hands. Ryan's presence had shifted the air, and though she tried to dismiss it as nerves, she couldn't shake the sense that something vital had shifted. Megan, full of birthday glow, didn't catch the hesitation. She had already tossed her bag into the back seat and slid behind the wheel. Come on, Mom, let's go. I'm starving. Ellen lingered beside the open passenger door, Ryan's shadow falling across her shoes. His grin never faltered, though his eyes glinted with something unreadable. She couldn't tell if it was mischief or something colder. At last, she forced herself to move, slipping into the back seat. The leather was chilly against her palms as she buckled in. Ryan shut the door for her, polite to the point of performance, then climbed back into the front. Appreciate you letting me drive, he said easily, glancing at Megan. Thought it'd be fun, you know? Birthday chauffeur. Megan laughed, her delight bubbling in the small space. I didn't even ask. He just offered. I thought, why not? Ellen's throat tightened. Why not? Her mind, however, spun with possibilities, each one darker than the next. Since when did Ryan care enough to volunteer for errands? And why, of all days, had he chosen this one? She tried to sound steady, casual. That's considerate of you, Ryan. The boy's smile twitched wider, as though he'd been waiting for her approval. Anything for Megan? The way he said it made Ellen's skin prickle. Megan, too focused on fumbling with the radio, didn't hear it. As the car rolled down the quiet suburban street, Ellen kept her gaze fixed on the back of Ryan's head, searching for answers in the easy tilt of his shoulders. Her purse sat heavy on her lap, the velvet box inside pressing against her leg. What had been a gift now felt like a burden, its significance overshadowed by the stranger's presence. Megan hummed along to a song on the radio, blissfully unaware of her mother's silence. Ryan tapped the steering wheel in rhythm, relaxed, as if he owned the day. Ellen folded her hands, hiding the tremor in her fingers. Something was wrong. She couldn't prove it, couldn't even name it yet, but the certainty pressed against her chest like a stone. Then Ryan glanced into the rearview mirror. For the briefest moment, his eyes locked with hers. The smile slipped, replaced by something sharper, colder, something meant only for her. Ellen's breath stuttered. Whatever this day had been meant to be, she knew then. It was no longer hers to control. The hum of the tires on asphalt filled the silence, steady and unyielding. Ellen sat rigid in the back seat, her purse anchored to her lap like armor. Every bump in the road jolted her thoughts loose, and each one landed heavier than the last. She had imagined laughter, surprise, joy, but instead, unease coiled inside her, thick as smoke. From the front seats came the easy rhythm of conversation. Megan leaned toward Ryan, laughing at some offhand remark, her voice bright and carefree. He responded smoothly, his tone threaded with confidence that seemed too practiced for a boy his age. Ellen watched the angle of their shoulders, the way Megan tilted toward him, the sparkle in her eyes when he spoke. It was the look of someone enchanted. Too close, Ellen thought. Far too close. She pressed her fingertips against the velvet box inside her purse. She had wanted today to mark a turning point, something that belonged to the two of them, mother and daughter. Instead, Ryan sat in the middle of it all, claiming ground he hadn't earned. Megan turned down the radio. "So, I was telling Ryan about that project I've been working on for school. He's been a huge help." Ellen's gaze sharpened. "Project?" Her voice came out strained, thinner than she meant. Megan nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, for senior year. It's kind of a big deal. I'll tell you more later, but Ryan's been like my lifesaver." Ryan shot a quick glance at Ellen in the mirror. The smile was back, subtle this time, as if he'd rehearsed it for moments like this. "She's got some impressive ideas," he said, his voice even. "Just needed a little guidance." The words slithered into Ellen's mind, raising questions she didn't dare put into the air. Guidance in what exactly? Why had her daughter kept it from her? Her throat felt dry. She shifted her gaze to the world outside the window. The blur of leafless trees, the tidy rows of houses sliding past, but her reflection in the glass betrayed her, wide-eyed and uncertain. She wanted to ask. The urge burned her tongue. "What are you working on, Megan? Why didn't you tell me? Why is Ryan involved at all?" But the thought of pushing too hard, of souring the moment she still clung to, the gift, the reveal, held her back. "Mom?" Megan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You okay back there? You've barely said a word." Ellen forced a smile, though she doubted it reached her eyes. "Just listening. You two seem to have plenty to talk about." Megan giggled, nudging Ryan playfully. "We always do." The casual intimacy of it sliced deeper than Ellen expected. She felt her chest constrict, her heartbeat uneven. Something was off, something she couldn't quite pin down, but she recognized danger when it sat this close to her daughter. The car slowed at a red light. Ryan drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, humming softly to himself, utterly at ease. Megan leaned over to whisper something in his ear. Ellen couldn't hear the words, but she caught the way Ryan's lips curved, confident, smug, and knowing. The light turned green. They surged forward, the silence in the back seat now deafening. Ellen clutched her purse tighter, the box inside digging into her ribs. Her surprise had been hijacked by something larger, darker, and she had no idea how to wrestle it back. Then Megan spoke again, her tone light, but charged with something Ellen couldn't place. "I can't wait to show you, Mom. Ryan says it's going to change everything." The words hung in the car like a storm cloud. Ellen's breath hitched. Change everything? Her pulse hammered against her temples as Ryan's eyes flicked once more to the mirror, locking with hers. This time, his smile was gone. The little bell above the restaurant door jingled as they stepped inside, releasing a wave of warm air laced with the scent of garlic and toasted bread. Ellen had chosen this place for its cozy booths and quiet corners, imagining an intimate birthday lunch with her daughter. Now, with Ryan at Megan's side, the scene felt hijacked, like strangers had wandered onto her stage. They slid into a booth near the window. Megan beamed as she shrugged off her coat, pressing close to Ryan as though the space between them was optional. He sat with a casual sprawl, confidence radiating from him as if he belonged everywhere he went. Ellen, sliding into the opposite side, felt suddenly like an intruder. The waiter dropped off menus, and Megan immediately leaned toward Ryan, whispering something that made them both laugh. Ellen forced her eyes onto the laminated page, though she didn't read a word. The sound of their laughter stung like static in her ears. When she finally glanced up, Megan's eyes were sparkling in a way Ellen hadn't seen directed at her for months. They shared a look across the table, mother to daughter. But Megan's attention flickered back to Ryan almost instantly. The food arrived quickly, steaming plates set before them, but Ellen's appetite was gone. She picked at her salad while Megan and Ryan swapped stories. They referenced moments Ellen wasn't part of. Inside jokes from school, little victories from a project Megan refused to name. Every mention of we left Ellen further outside the circle. She sipped her water, her throat tight. We used to laugh like that, she thought bitterly. Her secrets used to be mine. Ryan leaned back, gesturing animatedly as he described something, his sleeve brushing Megan's arm. She didn't flinch. She leaned closer. Ellen's chest constricted at the sight. It wasn't just friendship anymore. She knew the subtle language of bodies, the invisible string between two people who had already crossed a line or were about to. Her mind slipped backward to when Megan was younger, no more than 10, when Ryan had been the boy from down the street, the kid who hung around their porch, who raided their fridge for sodas, who once built a makeshift fort with Megan in the backyard. Ellen had brushed off the closeness back then, telling herself it was innocent. But now, sitting across from them, the echoes of that bond felt heavier, sharper, like something that had grown unchecked in the dark. She tried to insert herself into their conversation, asking Megan about college applications, about plans for the summer. Megan answered politely, but her replies were clipped, her eyes sliding back to Ryan after every sentence. Ellen's chest tightened with a new kind of ache. Exclusion. She couldn't remember the last time her daughter's attention hadn't been hers to share. The birthday gift pressed against her purse, a silent reminder of why she'd orchestrated this day. She wanted Megan to see it, to feel the thought and love behind it. But the longer she waited, the more it seemed irrelevant, overshadowed by whatever secret tether bound her daughter to Ryan. Megan nudged Ryan mid-bite, laughing at something only he seemed to understand. Ellen's fork froze halfway to her lips. She couldn't take her eyes off the two of them, too close, too natural, too much. Her pulse drummed louder than the restaurant chatter around her. The room blurred at the edges, her focus narrowing to the way Ryan brushed a crumb from Megan's cheek, his fingers lingering a fraction longer than necessary. Megan didn't pull away. She smiled. Ellen's stomach churned, bile rising at the back of her throat. Something was happening right in front of her, something she couldn't ignore or explain away anymore. She set her fork down, her hand trembling against the table. When Ryan caught her staring, he didn't look embarrassed. He looked deliberate. A thin, knowing smile curved his lips, sharp, taunting, as if he wanted her to see. Ellen's breath faltered. In that instant, she knew. Ryan wasn't just part of Megan's birthday. He was part of something far more dangerous. The late afternoon sun bled across the sky in muted orange, casting long shadows on the pavement as they left the restaurant. Ellen held the door a moment longer than necessary, as though stalling would somehow reset the day. But Megan was already bounding toward the car, Ryan steady at her side. "Let's not head home yet," Ellen said quickly, her voice sharper than she intended. "There's a park nearby. We could walk a little, get some fresh air." Megan glanced back, pleasantly surprised. "That sounds nice." But before Ellen could savor the small victory, Ryan spoke. "Good idea," he said easily, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I'll come along." The words landed like a stone in Ellen's stomach. He wasn't even asking, just declaring, as though her plans, her day, her daughter, already belonged to him. She forced a nod, though her pulse beat in her throat like warning drums. The park was quiet, leaves rustling underfoot as they followed a winding path between bare-branched trees. A chill hung in the air, carrying the scent of damp earth. Ellen slowed her pace, angling for space beside Megan, but Ryan matched every step, his stride glued to her daughter's. For minutes, Ellen said nothing. She listened to the crunch of gravel, the distant bark of a dog, the faint laugh that slipped from Megan's lips at something Ryan murmured. The sound carved into her like glass. At last, The pressure burst. "What's going on between you two?" The words cracked the air, louder than she meant. Megan froze mid-step, blinking at her mother as though she'd spoken a foreign language. Ryan's face, however, betrayed a flicker. Just for a second. His polished mask wavered, revealing something brittle underneath, before snapping back into place. "Mom!" Megan's voice was tentative, a thread of disbelief woven through it. "What do you mean?" Ellen folded her arms, though her hands trembled. "You've been whispering, laughing, sharing secrets like I'm not even here, and the way he—" She cut herself off, her breath uneven. "I just need to know." Color rushed to Megan's cheeks. She glanced at Ryan, her words fumbling out. It's not like that. We're just... He's been helping me, okay? With stuff. You don't have to..." "Helping you with what?" Ellen snapped. Her voice was sharper than she intended. But the knot in her chest left no room for softness. Megan opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted again to Ryan, searching for rescue. Ellen caught it. The silent exchange, the unspoken trust. It made her stomach lurch. Her daughter, once her confidant, now turned to him. Ryan said nothing. He stood still, his posture neutral, his face unreadable. But his silence spoke louder than words. He wasn't denying. He wasn't clarifying. He was letting Megan twist in the discomfort, as though testing how far Ellen would push. "Mom, please," Megan said finally, her voice fraying. "Can't we just enjoy today? It's my birthday. Do we really have to do this right now?" Her plea pierced Ellen, softening her for a heartbeat. But then she saw Ryan's reflection in a darkened park light. His lips curved into the faintest smile, sly and deliberate. He wanted her to back down. Ellen's pulse roared in her ears. No, she wouldn't let him win ground with silence and smirks. She took a step closer to Megan, her voice low but urgent. "Honey, I need the truth. All of it. Right now." Megan's lips parted, her eyes wide. Ryan shifted finally, his gaze snapping to Ellen with a coldness that made her breath falter. And in that sudden hush, Megan whispered something Ellen hadn't expected at all. The words tumbled from Megan's lips in a whisper, but they struck Ellen like a shout. "We've been seeing each other." For a moment, Ellen's heart forgot its rhythm. Her knees weakened and she gripped her purse tighter, the leather creaking under her fingers. She searched her daughter's face, praying she'd misheard. But Megan's cheeks were flushed, her eyes shimmering with both defiance and shame. "Seeing?" Ellen echoed, her voice breaking against the cold air. "You mean dating?" Megan's silence confirmed it. Ryan shifted his weight beside her, shoulders squared as if bracing for impact. The world around them, the rustle of branches, the distant bark of a dog, faded into nothing. Ellen felt stripped bare, her chest raw, every breath a jagged blade. "How long?" The question came out thin, brittle. Megan's gaze darted away. "A couple months. We didn't tell you because..." Her voice trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't exist. "Because we knew you'd be upset." Ellen's stomach hollowed. A secret, carried for months, had bloomed right under her nose. She thought of the late-night texts Megan brushed off, the sudden mood swings, the private jokes she wasn't privy to. All the signs were there, and she'd missed them. Betrayal cut deeper than anger. She wasn't just blindsided. She was locked out of her daughter's world, watching it unfold from the wrong side of the glass. Megan reached for her hand. "Mom, it's not that serious. We're just figuring things out. It doesn't change how much I love you." But Ellen couldn't absorb the comfort. The reassurance slid off her like rain on glass. Not serious? Ryan's presence today, his boldness, his smirk, told a different story. At last Ryan spoke, his voice low and measured. "Mrs. Carter, I wanted to be upfront. I told Megan we should wait until the time was right. I didn't want to ruin her birthday or upset you unnecessarily. His words were smooth, polished, but they scraped against Ellen's ears. Unnecessarily, as if her feelings were an obstacle to maneuver, rather than something sacred. Her protective instinct surged, flooding her veins with heat. She straightened her shoulders, masking the storm inside. You think lying, pretending is better? Hiding this from me for months? Ryan's expression remained calm, but his jaw tightened. It wasn't about hiding, it was about timing. Megan squeezed Ellen's hand, her eyes pleading. Mom, please. I didn't want to hurt you. That's why I waited. You've always been so protective, and I thought, if you saw us together, if you saw we're okay, you'd understand. But Ellen didn't understand. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, something Megan couldn't see, or refused to. She wanted to shake her daughter, to tear her free from whatever spell Ryan had woven. But she held back, swallowing the urge, because one wrong move could push Megan even further away. The park's shadows stretched longer around them, the late light cooling into dusk. Ellen stood between them, her daughter on one side, Ryan on the other, feeling as if the ground beneath her had shifted into dangerous terrain. She forced her voice steady. Megan, you're 18. You think you know what you're doing, but this changes everything. Her daughter's face fell, confusion and hurt mingling. Ryan's gaze flickered in the dim light, sharp and calculating, as though he already knew Ellen's next move. Ellen's pulse pounded. She realized she had no choice. She couldn't let this continue unchecked. She would play calm, for now. But inside, a decision was hardening, one that neither of them would see coming. And as Ryan's faint smile returned, Ellen knew one thing for certain. If she didn't act soon, she might lose her daughter to him completely. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee gone stale, though Ellen hadn't touched her mug in hours. She sat at the table, elbows on the wood, staring at the velvet box that still sat unopened beside her purse. The ribbon mocked her now, its cheerful blue at odds with the storm pressing down on her chest. She didn't even hear Lily knock, just the creak of the door opening, the click of boots across the tile. Ellen? Lily's voice was soft but steady. Megan called me, said you two had a rough lunch. Ellen's eyes snapped up. She called you? The betrayal pricked again, sharp as glass. Lily pulled out a chair and sank into it, folding her hands. She sounded upset. I thought maybe you'd want to talk. Ellen bristled, but the dam inside her cracked. She told Lily everything. The restaurant, the walk, the confession she hadn't wanted to hear. The words spilled out raw, each one scraping her throat on the way out. When she finally paused for breath, Lily sighed. Ellen, you had to know this was coming eventually. She's 18. She was bound to date someone, and Ryan, well, he's been around for years. Ellen's pulse spiked, heat rising to her face. Don't you dare say I should have seen this coming. I trusted him. He was just the boy from down the street. I didn't think that he'd grow up, Lily interrupted gently. That Megan would notice? The calmness in her friend's tone made Ellen's skin crawl. She didn't want logic. She wanted outrage. She wanted someone to stand beside her and say this was wrong. Before she could snap back, another voice carried in from the hall. What's wrong now? Mark stepped into the kitchen, his tie loosened from work, eyes narrowing when he saw the two women huddled at the table. He grabbed the back of a chair but didn't sit, his jaw tight. Megan texted me too, said you found out. Ellen's head whipped toward him. She texted you? Before I even had a chance to... Mark held up a hand. Ellen, just tell me what's going on. So she did. Again. Each word heavier this time, weighed down by the exhaustion of repeating it. Mark listened, his brow furrowing deeper with every sentence. When she finished, he dragged a hand through his hair. She's 18. Legally, she can make her own choices. Ellen's breath caught. That's your response? That's all you have to say? I'm trying to stay calm, he said, voice low. We need to figure out if this is serious or just a phase. If we overreact, she'll dig in her heels. You know how she is. The measured tone scraped against Ellen's nerves. It sounded too much like Ryan's earlier. Calm, careful, detached. She slammed her palm on the table, startling them both. Why is everyone telling me to stay calm? My daughter is sneaking around with someone who looks at me like he's daring me to stop him. And none of you, neither of you, seem the least bit concerned. The silence afterward rang louder than her outburst. Lily's eyes darted toward Mark, but he said nothing, just tightened his grip on the chair back until his knuckles whitened. Ellen's chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to break something, to demand why no one else could see the danger she felt pulsing in her bones. Instead, she dropped her head into her hands, her voice cracking. What if he's using her? What if she's too blinded to see it? No one answered. The stillness in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Mark spoke, his tone edged with something darker. Then we find out. We don't just sit here guessing, we look closer. Ellen lifted her head, meeting his eyes. For the first time that night, he wasn't detached. He was deadly serious. And in his stare, Ellen saw the first glimmer of what she needed most. A way to fight back. The phone buzzed on the counter, its vibration rattling against the granite. Ellen glanced at the screen. Megan. For a split second she considered letting it go to voicemail, but then guilt crept in, tugging her toward the call. Mom? Megan's voice was softer than usual, tentative. Can we talk? Just us. No arguing, I promise. Ellen agreed, though her chest tightened at the thought of what might follow. Minutes later, they sat across from each other in the living room, the evening light spilling pale across the carpet. The velvet box still perched on the mantel, unopened, forgotten. Megan clasped her hands together, her face earnest. I need you to hear me out. Ryan and we're real. This isn't a phase, or a distraction. I'm happy with him. The words scraped across Ellen's chest like sandpaper. She bit the inside of her cheek, keeping her silence. Happy. Her daughter sounded convinced, but was it her voice Ellen was hearing, or his? Megan leaned forward, her eyes shimmering with something raw. You don't know how much he's been there for me, when things got hard, when I felt like no one understood. He did. He listens, Mom. He makes me feel like I matter. Ellen swallowed hard. Shame pricked at her, because hadn't that once been her role? Hadn't she been the one Megan confided in? The one she laughed with at midnight over popcorn? The one who knew every secret? Her voice came out quiet, fragile. Sweetheart, I don't doubt he listens. But love, real love, it's complicated. It takes more than late-night talks and smiles. You're young, and sometimes what feels deep is really... Don't, Megan cut in, sharper than Ellen expected. Don't say it's just hormones or that I don't know what I'm feeling. I do. He's good for me, Mom. Ellen studied her daughter's face, the stubborn set of her jaw, the pleading in her eyes. Doubt gnawed at her from the inside out. Was she being too protective? Or was Megan too blinded to see the danger crouching in plain sight? I don't want to lose you, Ellen whispered. You won't. Megan's voice cracked. But if you make me choose, I don't know what I'll do. The words landed heavy, like a door slamming shut. Ellen flinched, her mind racing. The wedge she feared was already forming, sharp and unforgiving. Megan pressed on, her tone gentler now, as if softening the blow. He's not perfect, I know that. But he sees me. He gets me in ways I can't explain. I feel like myself with him. Ellen's heart twisted, That was exactly what frightened her. Ryan had inserted himself so seamlessly, carving out a space that used to belong to her. Still, she forced a nod, fighting to keep her voice steady. I hear you. I really do. But what if he's not who you think he is? What if... Mom. Megan reached across the coffee table, her hand trembling but determined. I'm ready to take the next step with him, and I need your support. Please. The sentence echoed in Ellen's mind, pounding like a drum. The next step. Her daughter's innocence, her future, all wrapped in words Ellen wasn't prepared to hear. Her throat closed around the reply she couldn't give. Outside, a car engine revved, shattering the stillness. Megan turned toward the window, her eyes lighting up. He's here. Ellen's stomach dropped as Ryan's headlights cut across the front lawn. The weeks slipped by, but Ellen marked them in glances and gestures, not calendars. Ryan's car appeared in the driveway more often than not, its engine growling like an unwelcome reminder. She told herself she hated seeing it, but each time Megan climbed out, flushed with laughter and brighter than she'd been in months, Ellen couldn't deny the change. Her daughter glowed. That was the word that came to mind. Megan carried herself with a steadiness that hadn't been there before, a new confidence in the way she met the world. She handled her schoolwork, her job, even her chores at home without the constant prodding Ellen had grown used to. And yet, every flick of Ryan's hand across Megan's back, every inside look they shared across a crowded room, dug beneath Ellen's ribs. Pride and fear tangled inside her, impossible to separate. One Saturday afternoon, Ellen stood at the kitchen window, watching Megan and Ryan raking leaves in the yard. Megan's hair kept falling across her face, and each time, Ryan brushed it back with a gentleness that made Ellen's stomach twist. The yard filled with their laughter, easy and unforced, the sound rising above the scrape of rakes and the crackle of leaves. Ellen pressed her hand against the cool glass. She's happy. That much was undeniable, but happiness didn't erase danger. She knew how fragile joy could be, how quickly trust could be turned into a weapon. Later that evening, she found herself on Lily's porch, a steaming mug between her palms. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth, the kind of night that begged for quiet. I don't know how to do this, Ellen confessed, staring into her cup. For 18 years, she's been mine to protect. Every scraped knee, every broken heart, I fixed it. Now I'm supposed to step back and watch while she gives her trust to someone else? Lily leaned back in her chair, her eyes soft. That's what motherhood is, Ellen. Little by little, letting go. You can't choose who she trusts, or how. All you can do is decide whether you'll respect it. Ellen's throat tightened. Respect. The word tasted foreign. She wanted to fight, to hold on, to lock every door against harm. But the truth gnawed at her. Megan wasn't a little girl anymore. She was carving her own path, whether Ellen approved or not. Back home, Ellen lingered in Megan's doorway later that night. Her daughter was curled on the bed, Ryan's hoodie draped across her shoulders, scribbling notes in a notebook with earbuds in. She looked up, catching her mother watching, and smiled. It was small, but it was real, soft around the edges, free of defensiveness. For the first time in weeks, Ellen didn't see defiance in Megan's eyes. She saw a young woman building her own life. Ellen pulled the door halfway closed, leaning against the frame. The words Lily had offered returned to her, settling like a stone in her chest. You can't control it. You can only respect it. She exhaled slowly, letting the air leave her lungs like surrender. Maybe this was what trust looked like. Not comfort, not certainty, but standing in the unknown and choosing not to break apart. Still, unease simmered at the edges. Trust didn't come easily. Not when Ryan's smile carried that flicker of challenge. Not when every instinct told her something was waiting beneath the surface. And then, one night, as Ellen reached for her phone on the nightstand, A new message flashed across the screen. Unsigned. From an unknown number. You don't know who he really is. Ellen's blood ran cold. Ellen hadn't slept in 3 nights. She would drift, her body heavy with exhaustion, only to jolt awake at the memory of that anonymous text. You don't know who he really is. The words gnawed at her like a worm inside an apple, rotting her thoughts from within. She replayed every smile Ryan had given her, every knowing glance in the rearview mirror, every deliberate touch on Megan's arm. And now, on top of it all, his bold request. Marriage. She turned on her side, staring at the faint glow of Megan's closed door down the hall. 18. Too young, too trusting, too unaware of how easily love could devour. By dawn, she sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cooling mug of coffee. When Mark came in, tie draped loose around his neck, she didn't bother with small talk. She can't marry him, Ellen said flatly. Mark stilled, brow furrowing as he reached for the coffee pot. We don't even know if that's what they're planning. He asked her, Ellen snapped, her voice sharper than intended. I can see it in her eyes. She's ready to say yes. Mark leaned against the counter, sipping slowly before answering. Even if that's true, she's an adult now. We can't make this choice for her. The calm in his tone stung. She's a child, Ellen hissed. Our child. She doesn't know what she's walking into. Mark's gaze softened, though his voice stayed firm. She's stronger than you think. She's capable of making her own mistakes and learning from them. That's what growing up is. Ellen's throat ached. Mistakes. She'd spent 18 years trying to shield Megan from them. And now Mark was telling her to stand aside, to watch her daughter bind herself to someone who made her skin crawl. Later that evening, she sat in the quiet of the living room, the velvet box still on the mantel. The ribbon had gathered dust, its color faded. She'd imagined this gift would mark a moment of joy, not despair. She closed her eyes, picturing Megan in white, Ryan's hand gripping hers. The smug curl of his mouth as he stole her away under the guise of love. The image sent a wave of nausea crashing over her. But then another vision broke through. Megan smiling, radiant. Not a child anymore, but a woman claiming her life. The pride in her eyes, the certainty in her step. Ellen had wanted to keep her safe. Instead, she risked losing her altogether. The war inside her raged until the walls of the house seemed to pulse with it. She paced the room, chewing her lip raw, tears pressing against her eyes. To fight would be to push Megan away. To stay silent would be to betray every instinct screaming inside her. At last, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I can't stop her, she whispered into the empty room. I can't. The decision came like a blade to the chest, sharp, devastating, final. She would support Megan. Even if it killed her inside, she would stand by her daughter, because losing her completely was a wound she couldn't bear. She wiped her eyes, steadying her breath. But just as her resolve settled, her phone buzzed again on the coffee table. The same unknown number. This time, the message was longer. If you love your daughter, don't let her say yes. He's not who she thinks he is. Meet me tomorrow night. Alone. Ellen's hand trembled as she clutched the phone. The house had changed in ways Ellen couldn't quite name. It wasn't louder exactly, but fuller. Ryan's voice drifting down the hall, Megan's laugh rising in answer, the thrum of 2 people who believed the world was waiting for them. From the kitchen doorway, Ellen watched them huddled together at the table, laptops open, a mess of notebooks and coffee mugs scattered across the surface. They looked like a team, heads bent close as though plotting a future only they could see. A pang rippled through her chest, sharp and complicated. She never would have chosen this. But watching Megan speak with such conviction, gesturing animatedly as she sketched out plans, Ellen couldn't deny her daughter's strength. She saw it in the way Megan listened to Ryan but never shrank under his presence. She held her own, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. Ellen had expected to see submission, but instead she saw something fiercer, a young woman claiming the right to her choices. Later, as Megan packed a bag for a weekend trip with Ryan, Ellen lingered in the doorway. "You're sure about this?" she asked, careful to keep her tone light. Megan smiled, her hands moving deftly as she zipped the bag. "I've never been more sure about anything." The words stung, but there was no fear in Megan's face, only certainty. And in that certainty, Ellen felt the faintest flicker of pride. Her daughter was becoming the kind of woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to reach for it. That night, Ellen sat with Lily on the back porch, the crickets loud in the darkness. "It's getting easier," Ellen admitted quietly. "Not easy, but easier." Lily sipped her tea, nodding. "That's the thing about kids. You raise them to stand on their own, and then when they do, it feels like betrayal. But it's not. It's proof you did your job." The words settled in Ellen's chest like warm stones. Proof. Maybe she hadn't failed after all. Maybe this ache inside her was just the cost of letting go. Still, the tug-of-war inside her didn't disappear. Some nights, when the house was quiet and she caught sight of the unopened velvet box on the mantel, she still felt the ache of what might have been. A day of laughter, a surprise untainted by secrets. But when Megan came home glowing, her steps light, her voice bubbling with plans, Ellen made a choice. To step back, to trust, to believe that her daughter could navigate the storms ahead. She let herself breathe in that fragile peace, even when her instincts stirred. The future was a vast, unpredictable thing, but Megan would always have her support. And yet, peace never lasted long. On a gray afternoon, as rain pattered against the windows, Ellen gathered laundry from Megan's room. Beneath a pile of clothes, she found a folded piece of paper, edges worn from being opened and closed. She smoothed it out, her eyes catching the bold header, "Marriage License Application." The lines blurred as her vision swam, Megan's name, Ryan's, their signatures side by side. The ink was fresh. Ellen's knees buckled, and she sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in her hands. So it wasn't just talk, it was happening. And suddenly, all the quiet resolve she'd been building shattered, replaced by the same icy certainty that had haunted her from the beginning. She might lose her daughter forever, unless she acted now. The paper still burned in Ellen's mind long after she'd folded it back into Megan's laundry basket. The shock of it, those signatures side by side, had rattled her. But when Megan finally came home that evening, humming softly as she dropped her keys on the counter, something unexpected happened. Her daughter looked radiant. Not the fragile, giddy glow of a girl swept up in something reckless, but the steady warmth of someone who had chosen a direction and meant to follow it. Ellen found herself watching in silence as Megan moved around the kitchen, pulling ingredients from cupboards, her movements fluid and purposeful. There was a calmness about her that Ellen hadn't noticed before. "Mom?" Megan glanced over, catching her mother's stare. "You okay?" Ellen swallowed, her throat tight. "I was just looking at you. You seem happy." Megan smiled, a small curve of her lips, but it held weight. "I am. Really, I am." She hesitated before adding, "And a lot of that is because of you." The words disarmed Ellen. "Me?" "Yeah." Megan set down the cutting board and leaned against the counter. "You've always been in my corner. Even when you didn't agree with me, even when I made you crazy, you were still there. That matters, Mom." Ellen's chest ached. For so long she had seen only the distance, the secrets, the wedge Ryan had driven between them. She hadn't let herself notice the gratitude beneath it all. "I don't know if I've always been what you needed," Ellen admitted. "You were," Megan said firmly, her eyes locking with hers. "I wouldn't be who I am without you." The sincerity in her voice cracked something open inside Ellen. For the first time in months, she wasn't seeing a child slipping away. She was seeing a woman stepping forward. Later that night, Ellen sat on the porch alone, the summer air heavy with the smell of cut grass and distant rain. She thought of the years behind them, the scraped knees, the first days of school, the nights Megan had cried in her arms after a heartbreak. Every instinct had been to protect, to fix, to shield. But now she saw the truth in stark relief. Megan had always been her own person. Ellen had only been the guardrails, never the driver. The realization cut deep and soothed at once. Letting go wasn't weakness, it was trust. And trust, she realized, might be the truest form of love. The next morning, she found Megan at the table, poring over paperwork. Ellen sat down across from her. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about everything. About you." Megan raised her brows cautiously. "Yeah? I can't make your choices for you anymore," Ellen said, steady now. "I can only walk beside you. I don't know what the future holds. But I see you, Megan. I see the woman you're becoming, and I'm proud." Her daughter's eyes welled, but she blinked quickly, swallowing the emotion. "Thank you, Mom. That means everything." For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight between them lifted. Megan reached across the table, squeezing her mother's hand. Ellen felt warmth radiate through her, stronger than the fear that had ruled her for so long. Still, as the house grew quiet that evening, Ellen caught her reflection in the window. The unease hadn't vanished entirely. It never would. But it had been tempered by something stronger, faith in the daughter she'd raised. Her role wasn't to steer anymore. It was to stand steady, a harbor waiting, while Megan sailed her own waters. Ellen drew in a long breath, allowing the peace of that thought to settle. The fear that Ryan had once embodied didn't choke her anymore. She could finally say, without trembling, that her daughter's life was hers to live. But just as she let herself believe it, her phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. This time, the message was blunt. "If you don't stop him now, you'll regret it forever." Ellen's fingers went cold around the screen. The air at dinner felt different, charged, expectant, as if the walls themselves were waiting. Ellen couldn't shake the prickling in her chest as she set the last fork on the table. Megan and Ryan sat shoulder to shoulder, whispering in low tones, their hands brushing now and then. When Megan cleared her throat, the chatter in the room stilled. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes shimmering like they held a secret too heavy to contain. "Mom, Dad, we have something to tell you." Ellen's grip tightened around her napkin. She already knew. She'd known since finding the paper in Megan's room. But hearing the words was still like stepping into cold water. "We're engaged," Megan said, her smile radiant. She reached for Ryan's hand and he lifted it proudly, the small silver ring catching the light. For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Then Lily gasped. Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and pride. Ellen's breath caught in her throat. She thought she might crumble. But when her eyes landed on her daughter, so alive, so certain, something inside her shifted. She saw the joy radiating off Megan, the way her hand trembled not from fear but excitement. It wasn't the recklessness Ellen had dreaded. It was the courage of a young woman declaring her future. Her lips parted, and for the first time, the words didn't taste like ash. "Congratulations." Megan's smile widened, relief softening her shoulders. She shot forward, wrapping Ellen in a hug so tight it nearly unraveled her. "Thank you, Mom. That means everything." Ellen closed her eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's hair, and let herself hold on a moment longer. The fear didn't vanish, but it quieted beneath the undeniable truth. Megan was happy. Later, when the others drifted into conversation about venues and dates, Ellen found herself at the sink, rinsing dishes. Mark joined her, drying the plates. For a long time they worked in silence, the clink of porcelain filling the gap. Finally, Mark spoke. "She's grown, hasn't she?" Ellen glanced toward the table, where Megan leaned into Ryan, laughing with her whole body. "More than I was ready for." Mark handed her a towel. "That's the part nobody tells you. You don't just raise them, they raise you too." The words settled heavy in her chest, yet there was a strange comfort in them. She realized he was right. Megan had taught her more in these months of resistance and revelation than she had in years of scraped knees and bedtime stories. When the night ended, Ellen lingered in the doorway, watching her daughter step outside with Ryan. Megan's hand was tucked confidently in his, her steps light, her face forward toward a future that no longer seemed distant. Ellen's throat tightened, but it wasn't grief this time. It was awe. Somehow, against every fear, Megan had become ready. And maybe, just maybe, Ellen was too. She returned to the quiet of the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. On the mantel, the velvet box still sat unopened. She lifted it, running her thumb across the faded ribbon. She had imagined this gift would be her daughter's first step into adulthood, her mother's way of ushering her forward. But Megan had already taken that step on her own. For the first time, Ellen didn't feel the urge to stop her. She felt the urge to keep up. She tucked the box under her arm and whispered to the empty room, "You're ready. I see it now." The peace in her chest was fragile, delicate, but real. Then her phone buzzed again. The same number. This time, the message was only 3 words. "It's already begun." Ellen's fingers went numb around the box. Morning sunlight streamed across the kitchen table, catching the edges of bridal magazines and scattered notebooks. Megan sat with Ryan at her side, their heads bent together, sketching out the beginnings of a life they believed was already waiting for them. Venues circled, lists made, dates whispered like secrets. From her chair at the counter, Ellen watched, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. Once she would have bristled at the sight, every shared laugh, every touch reminding her of what she might lose. But now, watching Megan glow, the old fear dissolved into something steadier. Her daughter's life was unfolding in real time, and for the first time, Ellen didn't feel left behind. She felt included. Not because Megan asked her opinion on flower colors or catering menus, but because Megan's happiness spilled into the room, impossible to ignore. Later, in the soft hush of evening, Ellen found herself on Lily's porch again, a glass of wine warming her hand. The cicadas hummed in the trees, their steady drone a reminder of summers past. "You look lighter," Lily said, studying her friend. Ellen chuckled softly. "I feel lighter. I think I finally figured it out. My job isn't to steer her anymore. It's just to be here, steady, while she steers herself." Lily nodded knowingly. "That's the trick, isn't it? You never stop being a mom, you just change how." The words struck deep. Ellen sipped her wine and let the thought settle. Her role had shifted, yes, but it hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown more profound. She wasn't the shield anymore. She was the anchor. When she returned home that night, Megan was curled up on the couch with Ryan, scribbling ideas across a notepad. She looked up, eyes bright. "Mom, what do you think of a small ceremony? Something intimate? Just family and close friends?" Ellen's heart swelled, not because she loved the idea itself, but because her daughter still wanted her voice in the room. "I think," Ellen said carefully, "whatever makes you happiest will be perfect." Megan's grin widened, her relief obvious. Ryan glanced over too, and though Ellen's old instincts still prickled at his gaze, she found herself meeting it without flinching. For now, Megan's joy outweighed the shadows. Days blurred into weeks, filled with talk of dresses and vows, of futures mapped with bold certainty. Ellen helped where she could, stepping back where she couldn't. Each time she watched Megan stand taller, speak clearer, love harder, a quiet pride filled her chest. It wasn't the future she'd pictured, not the tidy milestones she'd once imagined. But life, Ellen realized, was never meant to be tidy. It was meant to surprise, to challenge, to demand surrender. And she had surrendered, at last. One afternoon, she stood in the doorway as Megan adjusted a dress in the mirror, her face alight with a woman's confidence. Ellen felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't heavy anymore. They were light, born of pride rather than fear. "You're becoming exactly who you're meant to be," she whispered, more to herself than to her daughter. For the first time in months, peace filled her. Not fragile, not fleeting, but rooted. She could finally believe that no matter what lay ahead, Megan would meet it with strength. But peace has a way of being tested. That night, Ellen slipped into bed, the quiet house humming with calm. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She almost ignored it, thinking it was Mark or Lily, but when she turned it over, her breath stalled. The same number. Another message. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what he's capable of." Ellen sat upright, the piece she had clung to cracking like thin glass. The backyard glowed with strings of soft white lights, draped across the old oak tree and looped along the fence. Laughter drifted through the evening air, mingling with the smell of barbecue and the sweet bite of champagne. Family and friends gathered in clusters, voices bright, glasses raised. At the center of it all stood Megan, radiant in a simple dress. Ryan's arms steady around her waist. Her laughter carried over the crowd, clear and full, a sound Ellen hadn't heard in years. Not like this. Ellen moved through the party with quiet grace, accepting hugs, listening to congratulations, watching as her daughter floated from one circle of loved ones to the next. She expected the sharp pang of loss to rise, but instead, what filled her chest was something lighter. This was not the ending she had dreaded. This was a beginning she hadn't imagined. She caught Megan's eye across the yard, and in that glance, everything else fell away. Megan excused herself from a group of cousins and crossed the grass toward her mother. The moment she reached her, she pulled Ellen into an embrace that was firm, grounding. "Are you okay?" Megan whispered against her shoulder. Ellen's throat tightened. "More than okay." She pulled back enough to search her daughter's face. "You're ready. I see it." Megan's smile wavered with emotion. "I couldn't have gotten here without you." The words landed like sunlight after rain, warming every shadow Ellen had carried for months. For so long she had feared losing her daughter, watching her slip into a future that didn't have room for her. But standing here, held in Megan's arms, she realized she had never been left behind. Later, as the night stretched on, Ellen found herself at the edge of the crowd with Mark. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching their daughter glow at the center of it all. "She's something else," Mark said, pride softening his voice. "She always has been," Ellen replied, her eyes glistening. "I just needed to remember." Mark slipped his hand into hers, a rare gesture these days, and gave it a squeeze. "We did good." The simple words settled deep. They had done good. Their daughter was not a child anymore, but she was still theirs. Still tethered by love that distance or time could never sever. Ellen wandered back into the crowd, her gaze returning to Megan and Ryan. She studied them carefully, not with suspicion, but with acceptance. Their future would not be without storms. No future ever was. But Megan's strength was undeniable. She had chosen her path, and Ryan was part of it. And for the first time, Ellen believed that was enough. As the evening wound down, Megan found her again. The crowd had thinned, and the yard lay in the soft quiet of midnight. She slipped her hand into Ellen's and leaned her head on her shoulder. "I love you, Mom," she murmured. Ellen pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love you too, more than you'll ever know." They stood like that for a long while, just the two of them, the party fading into memory around them. Ellen felt the shift inside her settle. No longer the desperate need to hold on, but the quiet strength to let go and still remain. The bond between them had not broken. It had bent, stretched, reshaped itself into something new, something stronger. When Megan finally drifted back to Ryan's side, Ellen stayed behind, gazing at her daughter's silhouette against the glow of the lanterns. Pride welled in her chest, deep and steady. She had feared this moment for so long, but now she embraced it. She whispered into the night, to herself as much as anyone listening. "I thought I was losing my daughter, but in reality, I was gaining a new chapter in both of our lives." Rachel sat at the plaintiff's table, Hannah beside her, legal files stacked in neat verticals. Across the aisle, two representatives from Knox and Thatcher whispered behind narrow smiles. Their lead counsel, a man who looked like he lived in tailored suits, hadn't stopped checking his watch since he walked in. Ethan sat behind her, silent, present, suit pressed, tie straight. For once, his shoulders weren't hunched. The judge entered. It began. Hannah's voice was steady, almost surgical, as she laid out their position: forged signatures, undisclosed financial partnerships, inactive contracts exploited after the fact. She submitted Rachel's affidavit, timelines, transaction trails. Every breadcrumb was backed up, indexed, and locked in. When the Knox side countered, their argument was technical, language buried in boilerplate. But even Rachel, without a law degree, could feel it. They were scrambling to legitimize what now looked like a shakedown. Halfway through rebuttal, the judge held up a hand. "Counsel, I've read the materials. Ms. Barlow's claim shows consistent fraud, misrepresentation, and gross breach of fiduciary responsibility. Her team provided a clear paper trail. You did not." The other side shifted. The judge continued. "Unless there's compelling evidence you've yet to present, I'm prepared to rule." Hannah didn't blink. "We're ready, Your Honor." 30 minutes later, Rachel stood in the courthouse hallway, her back to the cool marble wall, eyes closed. They'd done it. The contract was ruled unenforceable. The $7.4 million debt, now the subject of arbitration, not a hammer over her head. Her personal accounts were released. Her business, intact. She didn't cry. She just breathed. Outside, Peter clapped Ethan on the back. "You survived court and didn't vomit. That's a win." Ethan managed a weary grin. First time for everything. Rachel watched them, her heart doing a complicated thing. Not joy, not relief. Not yet. But something close. Something cleaner. Hannah joined her. "I won't say we're out of the woods, but the fire's not on your heels anymore." Rachel nodded. "I know. But it's not just about fire now. It's about rebuilding." That night, Rachel found Ethan at the kitchen sink, washing dishes he didn't dirty. "Still anxious?" she asked. He nodded. "Relieved too. Just processing." She walked in, leaned against the counter beside him. "You were solid today," she said, "start to finish." Ethan glanced at her, eyes uncertain. "You think I'm finally earning it back?" Rachel took a long breath. "Earning it back isn't the point anymore." He frowned. "Then what is?" "Changing the story," she said simply. "For both of us." In the days that followed, the tone of everything shifted. Calls became calmer. Emails, less urgent. The emergency morphed into a strategy. Rachel worked with her accountant to restructure assets, set aside protected funds. Ethan signed a limited power of attorney, giving Rachel oversight until final arbitration, voluntarily. No lawyers demanded it. Peter checked in daily. Sarah organized a fundraiser behind Rachel's back, then claimed innocence when it raised $12,000 in 48 hours. Even Rachel's inbox, once a source of panic, started bringing good news. One morning, she received a message from an old client saying they'd heard what happened, rumors mostly, and wanted her back on retainer. "You fought?" they wrote. "We trust people who fight for what's right." On Sunday, Ethan made breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, toast, pancakes that were burned on one side but edible. Rachel sat at the table watching him flip a lopsided pancake with too much pride. "I used to make those for you," she said. "I remember," he replied. "Yours were better." "Still are." He laughed. "Fair." She looked at him. Really looked. There was weight in his face, yes, but also shape, resolve, humility, growth. "Ethan?" He turned. "I trust you." His eyes blinked, surprised. "You do?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I won't waste it." Later that afternoon, Rachel sat in her home office, sorting final documents to close one of the shell LLCs Ethan had been wrapped into. She was halfway through uploading forms when a new file appeared in the secure drive Ethan shared with her. No title, no notes, just a single attachment. She opened it. Inside was a signed disclosure agreement, one neither of them had seen before, and attached to that was a ledger. Knox and Thatcher hadn't just been tied to her past, they'd still been funding someone in her inner circle. The name was there. And this time, it wasn't Ethan. It was Sarah. Rain whispered across the windows as Rachel stirred sugar into her tea. The house was quiet. Not the hollow kind, but the kind that follows closure. Clean silence. No more constant phone vibrations. No more dread every time the doorbell rang. Across the room, Ethan was hunched over his laptop, earbuds in, a yellow legal pad filled with scribbles beside him. The kid who once ran from problems was now knee-deep in a repayment model for the arbitration committee. She hadn't asked him to do it. That was the difference. He was showing up because he wanted to. Rachel's gaze drifted to the fireplace mantel where a photo of the two of them sat in a cheap silver frame. He was 10, missing a front tooth, laughing so hard his head was thrown back. She looked younger, brighter, but not necessarily stronger. She'd thought strength was never breaking. Now she knew it was about what came after the breaking. The knock came just before noon. Rachel opened the door to find a courier in a windbreaker holding a clipboard. "Ms. Barlow?" "Yes." "Delivery from the arbitration panel, signature required." She signed, took the envelope, and closed the door gently behind her. Ethan looked up as she walked back in. "That it?" She nodded and opened it slowly. Inside, one sheet of paper. Ruling summary. Debt restructure approved. Payment schedule confirmed. Rachel Barlow absolved of personal liability, pending review. She let out a breath that had lived in her lungs for months. "We're clear," she said. Ethan blinked. "What?" "They ruled in our favor. Your share is real, but mine's off the table." He stood, his voice almost cracking. "You're free?" Rachel smiled. "We both are." He crossed the room and hugged her, tight. For a long time, neither of them moved. Later that week, she returned to her office. Not the one with locked drawers and panicked voicemails. The new one, smaller but sunlit. 2 rooms, clean walls. Her name still on the door. Her assistant brought her coffee, just the way she liked it. No pity, just habit, just life. Peter visited that afternoon with a file of loose ends and a sandwich she didn't ask for. "You back in the game?" he asked, sitting across from her. "I never left," she said. He grinned. "You just played it differently." They didn't need to say more. That weekend, Ethan packed up what was left of his apartment. The lease was ending, and this time he wasn't being forced out. He was choosing to downsize, redirect, rebuild. Rachel stood in the doorway watching him tape up a box labeled Start Again. He glanced at her. You good? She nodded. Better than good. He grabbed the last folder from his desk and paused. You know, I've been offered a job. Rachel blinked. What kind of job? Compliance analyst, junior level, nothing glamorous, but solid. Real. You're going to take it? He smiled. I already did. She stepped forward and hugged him without a word. Sunday night, Rachel sat on the back porch with a blanket around her shoulders and a glass of wine in hand. The wind carried that early spring chill that always made her think of beginnings. Sarah called. They talked about nothing. Recipes, a local theater show, a neighbor who got a Tesla. Normal things. When the call ended, Rachel leaned back in her chair and looked at the sky. Stars blinked through the clouds. The quiet wasn't threatening anymore. She thought about the spiral they'd escaped. The emails. The lies. The courtroom. David. Sarah. Knox. Every betrayal had left something behind, but not all of it was ruin. Some of it was growth. She no longer feared losing everything, because she'd learned what couldn't be taken. Her resolve, her clarity, her family. Ethan stepped outside and handed her a blanket. You're gonna catch a cold out here. Then sit with me, she said. He did. They sat without speaking, just listening to the wind and the street sounds below. She glanced at him, hair still messy, profile calmer, still in that in-between space of youth and manhood, but different now, capable, accountable, ready. Rachel looked out into the night, her voice quiet but firm. We didn't just survive this, we thrived through it, and that's what truly matters.